The real conflict is not, in fact, between the Republican and Democratic Party. The real conflict that's taking place is between the national security state in the United States, on the one hand, within the federal executive branch, over and against the populist advocates in Congress and the people of the United States, who are all uniformly demanding full disclosure. This is a constitutional challenge now. It's a constitutional struggle between the overwhelming majority of the people of the United States who demand to be read in on the UFO secrets so that we can participate in the democratic decision-making processes declared 250 years ago that are going to govern our relationship with the UFO people for the next 10,000 years.
My name is Danny Sheehan. I'm a constitutional litigator who's worked some of the most important cases in modern American history. From Pentagon Papers, the Watergate scandal, to Iran-Contra. My legal career has led me now to this pivotal moment. As our human family confronts the implications of the existence here on our planet of extraterrestrial or extra-dimensional non-human species. I will be your guide as we dive into the profound philosophical, theological, and public policy questions pertaining to the UFO phenomenon, alien life, and the citizen movement for disclosure. This is the Full Disclosure Podcast, coming to you from the New Paradigm Institute on SpectraVision Radio.
This is during the process right now of the break that is being taken by Congress. They'll be coming back on the 13th of this month in July. And at that point, they're going to take up the question of whether or not the Senate Majority Leader, John Thune, is going to be inserted into the National Defense Authorization Act for 2027, the amendment to the NDAA that has been proposed by Chuck Schumer, Senator Schumer, and Mike Rounds. This is the Schumer-Rounds amendment that had been passed back in 2023 that is very importantly ordering the executive branch of the United States government to appoint a 9-person board of review to review all of the documents that are in the possession of the United States government and any materials they have, commanding them to do the gathering of all this information together and making it available. Okay, now that was not approved by the House of Representatives back in 2023, but the House did in fact approve 23 pages of it, as you know, that did command the executive branches by both the Senate and the House now to gather all of this information together. And this is the information, portions of which have been released so far by the executive branch pursuant to the directive of President Trump. There have been 3 tranches of this information, which we've critiqued earlier as being basically just the outermost rings of a series of a dozen concentric circles of information, just still maintaining that they can't really tell what's going on. This is kind of a baffling phenomenon. They're acknowledging that it's real, no longer asserting that it's just flocks of birds that have been misidentified. But the bottom line is it's not really revealing anything very new as far as what we all know that have spent a lot of time reviewing this information. But what's going to happen here is that since Chuck Schumer and Mike Rounds have re-proposed the additional 40-some pages now to be inserted into the new National Defense Authorization Act, which would require the setting up of this Senate-approved or ratified appointments to this board of review. Now, I want to be clear about the fact that We here at the New Paradigm Institute, and I think most of the citizens organizations that are involved in trying to compel full disclosure of the UFO information, are not at all optimistic that the Senate Majority Leader John Thune is going to do anything differently than Mike Johnson did. Mike Johnson, who's the Republican Speaker of the House, pursuant to obvious directives from the executive branch, refused to allow Congressman Eric Burleson's proposed insertion into the House version of the National Defense Authorization Act of the same amendment. That was refused, even a rule to even go onto the floor for a vote by Mike Johnson. Okay, so we're assuming that the same thing is going to happen over on the Senate side, that John Thune, who's the majority leader for the Republican Party, is going to be directed by Donald Trump and the executive branch not to authorize this to even go to the floor for a vote, because they have taken the position that that is the executive branch, is going to appoint its own governance board to govern the decisions that are going to be made about what future releases of information are going to be allowed. What I want to do today is I want to point out that during this 4th of July period, there are two major sort of competing narratives in the motion pictures that are all available for you right now. There is the one that we've talked a lot about Steven Spielberg's Disclosure Day, that is breaking all the records and millions of people are going to go see it. But playing over and over and over again on the television cable stations is Independence Day. This is Will Smith's major movie, presenting the UFO coming and the ET beings being completely a threat to human civilization, and Will Smith taking on the ETs in new souped up jet aircraft to fight them and fight them back and push them away from our planet and save the day. This is a dramatically different narrative with regard to our human response to the ETs and the motivations on the part of the ETs from those that were displayed in Disclosure Day by Steven Spielberg. And what I want to do today is I want to talk about these two competing narratives, because these two competing motion picture narratives about the motives of the ET people and the response that should be supported by the citizens to them is reflective of the much deeper cultural competition that's going on here in the United States and is much written about, that's going on between this kind of, on the one hand, this extremely nationalistic, right-wing, pro-military, pro-corporate wealth and power that's being espoused by Donald Trump and his acolytes, Stephen Miller and Pete Hegseth and the others. This narrative, on the one hand, is part of a cultural surge to try to turn back the clock on our progress that we've made here in the United States with regard to the constitutional rights of individuals and the powers of Congress to assert its control over the military on the one hand. And on the other side of that cultural divide, we see, of course, that MAGA movement in the United States on the extreme right has basically taken over the Republican Party and is dominating the entire policies of the Republican Party now. This cultural narrative is in competition with the liberal ethos of the United States that has been predominantly represented by the National Democratic Party. And we see the National Democratic Party, which is sort of a moderately left of center coalition of forces in the United States, now being beset by an insurgency being sponsored by the Democratic Socialists of America, basically putting forth candidates that are very forward about their membership in the Democratic Socialist movement in the United States, represented by people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the newly elected Democratic mayor of New York, Zohran Mamdani, and the newly victorious members of the Democratic Socialists of America in seats in Congress for the Democratic Party nomination. These are all publicly declared members of the Democratic Socialist movement in the country that are basically forming this insurgency into the Democratic Party, which is just a moderate left-of-center party traditionally. The Republican Party had been sort of a moderately right-of-center political party that's now been taken over by this extreme right-wing element of the MAGA movement. And this is kind of this larger dynamic that's going on in the country right now. Such a purported dramatic difference between these two factions that have arisen within the National Republican Party and within the National Democratic Party does not really pertain to the UFO issue, as you might guess from looking at the two competing narratives between the Disclosure Day narrative relating to the UFO phenomenon by Steven Spielberg and this Will Smith Independence Day kind of response to the UFO phenomenon. This would be presenting a completely false impression to the American public about the differences between these two worldviews in their response to the UFO issue. This is not a true reflection of there being any such conflict with regard to the UFO issue within Congress. You have people across the political spectrum in the United States Congress being completely supportive of full disclosure. You have on the one side Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Jamie Raskin, others within the kind of more progressive caucus members of the United States Congress, as well as Eric Burleson from the 7th District in Missouri, Tim Burchett from the 2nd District in Tennessee, Anna Paulina Luna from the 13th CD out of Florida, extremely conservative areas of the country, all completely in unison, supporting this total demand for full disclosure of the UFO phenomenon. So the real conflict that is going on pertaining to the UFO and ET issue and full disclosure is not between the Republican Party in its traditional form, or even the more conservative or reactionary elements within the Republican Party and the MAGA movement, over and against the Democratic Party, either in its moderate left-of-center position or the insurgency occurring inside the Democratic Party from the farther left, Democratic Socialists. The fact is the confrontation is not, in fact, between either of these elements of the Republican and Democratic Party. The real conflict that's taking place is between the national security state here in the United States, on the one hand, within the federal executive branch, over and against the populist advocates in Congress and the populist people of the citizens of the United States, who are all uniformly demanding full disclosure of the information about the UFOs. So this is, in fact, not a cultural clash or a political clash. This is, in fact, a constitutional struggle that is going on here. It's important to understand that the campaign to secure full disclosure of the UFO phenomenon, both from our U.S. government and from the major conservative religious community here in the United States, to be framed accurately, cannot be honestly portrayed as a conflict between the conservatives and the liberals, between the MAGA people and the Democratic Socialists of America. It is, in fact, no such struggle, no such cultural struggle. It's a constitutional struggle between the overwhelming majority of the people of the United States who demand to be read in on the UFO secrets so that we can participate in a democracy that has been declared 250 years ago in our Declaration of Independence, to participate in the democratic decision-making processes that are going to govern our relationship with the UFO people for the next 10,000 years. The national security state has been established by the same aristocratic, robber baron type people from whom we were declaring our independence back 250 years ago. You know, that dominating commercial group that was putting taxes on the colonies in charge of the royalty in Europe, in England specifically. We rebelled against all of that. We insisted upon our independence from them. But this national security state has been established here in the United States, beginning at the end of World War I and entering into the whole age of American imperialism that followed that and surrounded that period, and the end of World War II, where the elements within the major private investment corporate firms around the United States, such as Brown Brothers Harriman, that had the wealthy patrons and patriarchs of the wealthiest families in the country, all as investment members of Brown Brothers Harriman. And it was Robert Lovett, who was a senior partner of Brown Brothers Harriman, who actually wrote the letter to President Truman advocating that the Central Intelligence Agency be established and a National Security Council to be able to govern the United States policies in the realm of national security. These are the people that have risen to the point where they are exercising domination and control over the Congress of our United States and over all the policies, the foreign policies and the domestic policies of our country. And they are the ones who have seized upon this opportunity to keep secret from us this extraordinarily important set of information about the UFO phenomenon. The entire purpose of setting up the national security state, in their own words, is to secure and maintain our continued privileged access to the strategic raw materials around the planet that would be needed by our major American corporations, because they have this theory, as I've mentioned before, that what's good for General Motors is good for America. And therefore, if the U.S. military and the various instrumentalities of our government, including the intelligence community and our intelligence gathering capacities, our surveillance capacities, our satellite capacities, are all put to the task of identifying the strategic raw materials around the planet and mobilizing our military and intelligence forces to be able to secure and maintain our continued privileged access to these materials. These are the very people who have seized upon the information about the UFO phenomenon and have basically started passing this information to the private corporate sector of the private aerospace corporations in our country to try to enable them to develop military equipment out of which they can make hundreds of billions of dollars and literally trillions of dollars, in utilizing this technology to make a new generation of weapons, to be able to deliver nuclear payloads into Russia and China instantaneously, commandeering the propulsion technology of the UFO craft. Our present citizen-led populist public campaign to compel the national security state to provide to Congress all of the information about the UFOs and the extraterrestrial civilization that are sponsoring the arrival of these UFOs on our planet is a constitutional struggle on the part of Congress and on behalf of the citizens of our country who have declared our independence from this kind of domination by some wealthy, powerful, aristocratic elite in our country, who are the ones who own the shares of stock in these major private aerospace corporations and military defense contractors. We've declared our independence 250 years ago from these people, so that we should be celebrating and commemorating our 250-year-old Declaration of Independence from these people by insisting that we get full disclosure so that our Congress of the United States can exercise its constitutional authority under Article 1 of the Constitution, Section 8, Clause 14, which specifically authorizes Congress to govern all of the rules and regulations that are going to be used to govern the armed forces of the United States, including the right to declare or to decide what is going to be classified and what isn't. The New Paradigm Institute has drafted the 58-page bill that has been submitted at the request of the House Oversight Committee's task force on declassification of government secrets to re-empower Congress to declare what it is that's going to be made public about this information and to get their hands on all of it. This is a constitutional challenge now that we need to undertake to celebrate and to give genuine respect to the Declaration of Independence and to the Constitution of our United States, to empower our Congress to take back its authority to declassify all of this information and make it available to us. This is the birthday gift to which the citizens of the United States are entitled from this Congress. Not an obscene display of military power in the form of fireworks over our Capitol, or cage fights on the White House lawn. This is time to celebrate the Declaration of Independence and our American Constitution by demanding full and complete disclosure to be given to our Congress, and to have our Congress set up a body of people to review this information and to recommend to Congress that all of this be made public to us so we can participate as newly emancipated people here on our planet in making the policies of the future that will control our relationship with this extraterrestrial civilization for the next 10,000 years. So let us celebrate the Declaration of Independence by joining the Citizens for Disclosure. Contact us at thenewparadigminstitute.org and become members of the Citizens for Disclosure. Let's celebrate the 4th of July in our independence from tyranny and domination by those who seek wealth and power instead of democratic rights for our people. Thank you.
To join the citizen movement for disclosure, visit newparadigminstitute.org/take action.